Ready? Alright, so finishing up a few of the flood events. So this was a cataclysm of colossal scale. And if you've seen any of the flooding footage of North Carolina, you could have learned what a little bit of water can do in a small geographic area. So Noah's flood is an enormous amount of water, an enormous amount of damage over a huge area, like the entire Earth, and a whole lot of other catastrophes going on at the same time. So another event that was taking place, and this may have been the trigger of the flood, that's hard to say, but there's this interesting coincidence in that if you look at the flood sediments, 600 million years worth of rock that were laid down in 1 year, there is a high percentage of asteroid impact craters that land in that time frame. Now, asteroids don't normally impact the Earth in any given year, but in that year of the flood, as recorded in the flood sediments, there was at least 37 impact craters of a 12-mile diameter or larger that have been discovered so far. There are lots of smaller ones. In fact, there's 2 smaller ones that are close by. Has anybody ever been to Nugget Park in Pierce County? That is an impact crater, and you can go panning for gold in the river there. That is gold that came from an asteroid. And
Space gold.
Yep. And you can look it up online and find the map of that crater. It's a much smaller one. It's about 1.5 miles or 2 miles in diameter or something. And then just recently, the state of Minnesota was doing a geological survey in the neighborhood of Hastings. And yep.
Or just right there,
Yeah. So anybody driven on Highway 52 going east out of the Twin Cities, there's a giant oil refinery. That oil refinery sits on top of an impact crater that they discovered just a couple years ago. Same size roughly as the one in Plum City, Nugget Park area, 3/4 of a mile or a mile in diameter. And that also is dating to the flood of Noah. Like, there's several hundred impact craters that date from that period of time, and they're all recorded. And so, yeah, then the moon has lots of impact craters that are not original. They are definitely secondary. All the big dark patches on the moon are very large impact craters that probably came late. Mars actually has lots of impact craters that are suspected to be late. And Annabelle and I theorized that it was an inner solar system catastrophe that Earth got caught up in, potentially. That's just theory. We don't know for sure. But there was a lot of damage going on. Chesapeake Bay has a massive crater in it underneath the water that they discovered when they were putting in the bridge and the tunnel there, actually. Anyway, so let's see here. This is an example of one of the largest craters that is 50 miles in diameter up in Canada. And it filled up with water. Circular landforms tend to get people's attention because circles don't happen naturally, but they do happen as a crater impact. So that is in Quebec or Ontario in Canada somewheres. And you can find that on Google Earth if you're curious. Another major event that happened during the flood is all of the mountain ranges get formed when the continents collide into each other. I showed you that map last week. It showed how the continents were moving around during the flood. And so today we have all of these mountain ranges all around the world that are collisions between continents that form various mountain ranges. And actually there's one on Antarctica that is not shown on this map because Antarctica is too far south. But you've got the Andes Mountains, the Rocky Mountains, the Appalachians actually are barely on that map. The Atlas Mountains, the Himalayas are a very significant range. That was probably at the very end stages of the flood while the water was draining downwards. They think that the Himalayas forming probably reduced sea level 50 or 60 feet by itself, actually. Yes, Micaiah?
What happened in the middle of Australia?
I don't know that one. The McDonald Ranges, you have to Google those mountains. Not sure. That is a mountain range I'm not familiar with. So, another event that took place in the flood were some massive lava flows, the likes of which have never taken place post-flood that I'm aware of. The smallest scale, or a much smaller scale version of it, would be like that volcanic eruption that was taking place in Iceland, where you've got these rifts where lava is just flowing out. So that small scale, during the flood, there was a large scale one that covered a large chunk of Siberia. That was the largest scale one. That one is associated with a massive extinction event in the standard model. Imagine that. A lot of things went extinct because this is probably during the flood.
But that would explain why you find igneous rocks all over the world.
Yep. And this is just one of many examples. It's trap rock formation is a basaltic lava flow, and there's some north of here in Dresser. They have something called Dresser trap rock, and that is another basaltic flow. So we just about had something of this magnitude in North America, where a rift almost formed. It is now the basin of Lake Superior, but that rift stretches all the way down to Kansas under the surface. And if you go up to Interstate State Park in Wisconsin or Minnesota, you can see that basaltic rock where it got carved out a little later by a water flow. Same type of volcanic eruption. Let's see. 5 massive extinction events that took place in this period of time. So not everything died all at once, and that's something you see in the geological record, and they have it broken up into 5 different major extinction events, where enormous quantities of a whole ecological system end up getting buried simultaneously. So you start with some of the coastal ecosystems, and then you work up into the coastal plain, and then you get up into higher elevation forested regions. And like Micaiah pointed out last week, you have the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous periods, which are just 3 different ecological groupings of dinosaurs and all the plants that are associated with them getting buried sequentially during the course of the flood. The Triassic got buried first, and then the Jurassic got buried next, and then finally the Cretaceous hit. And does anybody know what happened at the very end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago?
The high water mark?
A giant asteroid.
Giant asteroid falls from the heavens, smashes into the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. I think that is the largest remaining crater that they found. And yeah, that was associated with the high water mark of the flood, and also the extinction of all the remaining dinosaurs that were still alive on the Earth.
Is that what caused the waters to recede?
Well, it caused a tidal wave or a tsunami to flow from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up across North Dakota and a few other places. So that was a massive event. Anyway, one of those extinction events caused most of the coal around the world that we find, and a lot of that coal seems to be bark ripped off of trees that were getting churned up on the surface of the flood waters, then settling down to the bottom and getting converted into coal. But it didn't always convert into coal, sometimes it converted into other types of rocks and minerals. But that powers the world today, and powered the Industrial Revolution, and we're trying to figure out how we can shift away from it. Anyway, that wraps up all of our massive flood events. It's a little cursory and superficial, but does anybody have any questions before we shift gears into the Tower of Babel? All right, go ahead and close that off, Micaiah.